podcast.
Guess what?
We're live. Hey,
I thought that might work.
Welcome to the Ben and Lauren show. Here we are. We're finally recording.
This is something like our 5th try to get this video to go live.
Seems like we always have some technical difficulties.
So Ben began making faces at the camera while we were waiting for it to go live, and I said, it's going to go live, and one of those is going to stick.
She was kissing me.
So I tried kissing him, and that worked.
I don't know if it got on the... It was graphic. Let's just put it that way.
It was not.
So...
It did work.
It did.
It did work. The computer had the same reaction our kids do.
So here we are, back on the Ben and Lauren show, and we are actually filming. So now, what are we going to talk about?
What are we going to talk about this week?
What do we do this week?
Now I got to get my brain back into what did we do this week here. I think we're going to talk about harvesting the sorghum.
Well, then, that brings up my prop. Check it out.
We had sorghum grow. We managed to get it to germinate, and it grew about 8 feet tall.
Well,
but it didn't quite manage to go to seed before the frost hit it, and all the leaves withered up. And I said, well, I guess we're going to have to harvest it. So I think what we've learned is that we can grow sorghum in very small amounts, but we're going to have to force it to germinate a lot earlier than just throwing it in the ground. Because it really didn't start growing. It didn't start growing.
Okay, stop.
It didn't start growing until, I don't know, July. Before
This
we
is
really
my personal
start taking
favorite.
off. So we cut it and we brought it in. The girls have since proceeded to basically run around the house with it because they think it's bamboo. And they've peeled it and chewed it. But we didn't really know what to do with it once we harvested it because we have no way of juicing it and we only had 3 stalks.
Okay, let's stop.
Can't see. So we have a little bit left that they haven't eaten.
You were talking about sorghum, I think. I was too busy playing with the
I know. That's what happens when we record too late at night. You get slap happy. So that was our sorghum harvesting.
So we've been nibbling on it. It doesn't really taste like much of anything. Kind of tastes like wood, but
wood and grass.
Because I don't think it really got to maturity.
Right.
But we did get a nice thick stalk, which feels really nice in the hand.
And that did start about 8 feet long.
And the girls have been having fun playing with them, like bow staffs or like walking sticks or batons.
It was pretty neat. We had sugar cane in the garden. We've never, kind
Actually,
of an exotic thing to grow.
Let me bring over one more thing.
Oh yeah, our 1 seed top.
So here's our prize.
That's as close as it got to going to seed. It
Yeah.
didn't quite make it.
No, there's no seeds in there. But
No, it never really flowered all the way. But
it's good decoration.
Try again another time. Try a different method. Be nice to be able to grow sugar. But Michigan is famous for its sugar beets.
I think we should try growing some
I
beets.
have a feeling if we wanted sugar, we should try growing sugar beets.
And we have to learn how to process the sugar beets to actually get sugar out of the sugar
Right.
beets.
It would kind of make more sense than sorghum for us.
Probably not that hard.
I don't know. Never done it. The rabbit might eat it. The rabbit ate all our beets this year.
I would say Michigan is more known for its sugar beets than its sugar cane or sorghum.
So as you can tell, we had kind of a boring week this week. We need to get out more. This was the highlight of our week.
Yeah, we were indoors most of this week.
Having to get used to it being cold again. The girls were
I did mow the lawn this week, though.
That's right, you did.
Mm-hmm.
You probably got the last grass cutting in because we had a lot of heavy frosts.
The girls did a little bit of raking.
Raked some leaves.
So we got outside a little bit.
Daniel had his second haircut for the week.
That's right. I got a haircut. Isn't that beautiful? Lauren did this myself. This haircut.
And he also learned to walk holding people's hands this morning.
Mm-hmm.
He has refused to pick up his feet when he's standing, but if he's holding hands, he is now walking around the house.
So that's because of me. Daniel was in my lap, and I basically put him down on the floor, but instead of having him sit down on his bottom like usual so he can crawl around, I had him stand up. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting. He's standing pretty well. So I decided to stand up next to him and take a few steps. And he did. He took a few steps with me. And then Abigail thought that was very interesting. She came over, grabbed his other hand, and walked with him. And between the two of us, Daniel walked around the whole house.
Yeah, at first he wouldn't pick his feet up off the floor. We were kind of dragging him a little bit, but then he got the idea.
Yeah.
So
He liked it. He was barefoot. I think it was the feeling of the feet on the ground.
Right.
Step, step, step.
He's going to be a year and 4 weeks, and I don't think he's going to be a 12-month walker, but maybe a 13-month or 14-month.
He wants to walk.
He would like to be up and around. He wants to run with the girls.
Yeah, he's already standing up and walking along
He
furniture.
is a speedy crawler. He's like really fast.
Yeah, he's a pretty strong boy.
So, other than that, it's been pretty quiet.
So that was basically our weekly wrap up. How exciting.
We did. Oh, you know what I did? I spent a lot of time this week cleaning and organizing.
Yeah.
I brought stuff up. We have this nice big basement. We don't really utilize it properly. So I started bringing up stuff that's been stored down there since before we were married, and Ben's been sorting through it because most of it's his.
Not utilizing correctly is code for messy.
No, it's not code at all. It's not being used. I mean, things can be messy and be used. It's not being used.
There's a lot of open space. There's a lot of piles
Right.
of stuff. There's a lot of junk we just love to get rid of.
So we're aiming at paring things down to keeping what we're actually using or as off season. Like if we have garden stuff in the basement for the winter, that's fine.
I have a habit of keeping things that I perceive to be valuable or perceive to be useful.
And I throw things out.
And what's funny is that when it comes to electronics, don't hold on to old electronics because then, 5-6 years later, you're going to say, wow, look at that wireless receiver. What is that, B? And it's just like you throw it away. There's no value to it anymore.
Yeah, when we moved into our house, Ben had about 12 totes and boxes full of clothes and lots of computer equipment. And I had 2 egg boxes. They were about this big, about maybe a foot square.
Yeah, you didn't have much.
Some clothes.
I had a lot of junk. I actually had 3 bags. I had 1 bag for garbage, 1 bag for keep to sell on eBay, right? That was my intention anyway.
I know.
And then the third was to keep. So I had my pitch, sell, and keep. And I basically kept 2/3 of everything I own because I
Wow.
kept all the sell stuff with the intention of selling it and never did.
Well, just think how nice it'll be to throw it all
It'll
out.
be wonderful.
So
And then,
we'll get to that next week.
so next time you go through it, your sell list ends up going in the pitch list.
We do a lot of this kind of stuff in the wintertime because we're inside and it seems like, well, we should put this time to use doing something besides reading or kind of not getting much done.
Right.
So that's what we do.
We're organizing.
We kind of got a little scattered today because we were reading about the shooting in the synagogue in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, we found out about that this morning, and we didn't really follow a lot of it this morning. We kind of caught up on it tonight. At least I was watching some of the reports and things. And initially, it was 8
8
were
people
killed,
had
but
died.
what we found from tonight, I think it's 11.
Sounds like there was multiple services going on, and they were having a circumcision
It
ceremony.
was a circumcision in the morning.
And so that would have been a big family thing, and there was babies and small children in the basement. And there is something uniquely disturbing about people getting together to read the Bible and pray and have a ceremony welcoming a newborn basically into your faith and having someone come in and start shooting.
Apparently, he just walked in the front door, started shooting people up, went down in the basement where the circumcision was happening, and shot up a bunch of people down there. Came up, was met by some resistance. The police came in, and I think he was injured.
Sounds like he was injured. They said he was crawling on the floor.
So he retreated up to the 3rd floor, and he was pretty much trapped because the place had been mostly evacuated.
Unlike Judge Kavanaugh, he's still being treated as innocent until presumed guilty because even though everybody in the world knows he walked through that door shooting, they still say he allegedly went through that door. So the guy is obviously the guy who did it. Everyone knows he's the guy who did it, and they're still saying allegedly because he's innocent until proven guilty.
But everyone else is guilty until proven innocent.
Apparently. We're troubled because the whole bombing situation and catching the bomber, at this point, we feel as if when we watch the news, we really cannot trust anything that's being said because the first thing that's always said is that this must be some right-wing activist. This is a conservative person. This is a Christian person. They always are trying to immediately start casting suspicion on basically people like us.
Well, the synagogue shooter is not a conservative. He does not like Trump.
He's not a Christian either.
He's not a Christian. He's a lunatic.
And the
Actually,
guy,
he's not a lunatic. He's evil.
There's a big difference between being crazy and being evil.
He's an evil man.
There's been a lot of not crazy evil
He
people.
pretty much just got mad at something, blamed the Jews, grabbed his gun, went to the local synagogue, started shooting it up.
Right. So we find it disturbing that, for instance, the bomber that was arrested down in Florida, there was a big rush to say he must be a Republican out to get Democrats because it's all Democrats. The first thing we said when we saw that was, what Republican would be an idiot enough to do what this guy is doing?
All I can say is I've never had an October on an election year with so many surprises.
I know. It's getting a little
October
unsettling.
surprise after October surprise. It makes you wonder what's next.
It also makes us wonder what's going to happen after this election that's coming up the first week of November. We're getting concerned because for anyone out of country who might possibly watch this, elections here are usually very boring in their aftermath. We don't really do much of anything. People grouse and complain, but nothing much happens. There were some riots after Donald Trump's election. And with the level of emotional frenzy that's being generated right now, I have this feeling that we're going to have riots no matter what the outcome. It's going to be the same people rioting no matter what the outcome. It's not going to be one side riots or the other side. The same people are going to riot because if Ted Cruz wins his seat in Texas, there's going to be a riot in Detroit because Ted Cruz won in Texas. That's the feeling we get right now. It's very volatile. It's very uncertain, and we feel as if
time will tell. I mean, we'll see what happens after the election. I mean,
we're uneasy, though.
Yeah. I mean, maybe we're wrong, but I think the prediction is it's going to be overwhelmingly Republican.
No, that the prediction is going on that there's an 86% chance the Democrats win.
Really?
Yes. And that's about what happened when Hillary was going to win the election. And that's why I think that there may be riots either way, because
there's going to be a lot of allegations of fraud. There's going to be a lot of allegations of all sorts of things.
It is just a mess. It's a mess. And what I'm concerned about is I'm wondering if we should do some things like getting ready for a big snowstorm. If we need to make sure we have groceries, we need to make sure we have gas, and we need to wait and see what's going to happen for that next week. And I've never felt like taking precautions like that before an election.
We might be locking the doors and bunkering down.
Maybe staying home.
That's what happens when you live in a suburban area. I mean, you don't know.
You're at the mercy of your neighbors.
You don't know what your neighbors are going to do.
Yeah, mom and dad might get violent.
I mean, you're going to know your immediate neighbors, but there's always people in the neighborhood. You don't know what they're going to do. I mean, they can just snap.
These are very strange times we live in.
Yeah.
What's the old curse? May you live in interesting times.
We live in interesting times.
We live in interesting times.
And it's getting interestinger all the time.
But, and the good news, I really don't think we will be expecting fire and brimstone raining down on us.
Not
maybe not yet.
That's not up to us, is it? Well, it is to a certain extent.
That was our Torah portion this week.
Repent.
Sodom and Gomorrah's destruction was in the Torah portion this week.
Yeah, we read the Torah portion and we spent most of the time discussing Sodom and Gomorrah. And Sodom and Gomorrah is a pretty interesting topic. It was one of the first things that made me realize the Bible is real. When you see the ruins of Sodom and Gomorrah, I don't know if you've ever, maybe I can link it in the bottom here, but you see the ruins of Sodom and Gomorrah, you see the actual sulfur pellets.
The sulfur pellets. We know people who've gone there and dug those up too. It's not just a funny thing you can watch in a documentary.
Yeah, back 2014 for Sukkot, we went out to Tobermory, and we got to witness an actual sulfur ball from Israel, from Sodom and Gomorrah, or Gomorrah.
Set it on fire.
And they set it on fire, and you could see it burning with this almost...
Oh, and it stank.
It's an invisible flame. You really can't see it unless it's dark out. It was dark at night, so you have this...
really, really
So you have this
strongly.
blue flame over the sulfur ball, and you could not breathe the fumes. It would just knock you out.
From that one little tiny... It was less than a golf ball sized.
So I could not imagine
They burned it outside.
I cannot imagine what a city would be like if it was just raining this kind of stuff on fire. It would just knock everybody out before anything else, and the bodies would be incinerated. Actually, the city would be incinerated.
But what we really discussed last night when we were reading it ever since we had our discussion about Noah and his household last week, and we started realizing how much of the Bible is the story of households, we said, okay, so what is the story of the households in this Torah portion?
Right. And we've been enjoying going through the Torah portions talking about households. And there's definitely a discussion about households twice in this Torah portion, having to do with the household of Abraham and the household of Lot.
Yes, two very close relatives raised in the same place. Lot is Abraham's nephew, is known as a righteous man. He was mentioned later in the Bible as a righteous man grieved by what he saw around him. So whatever speculation we have on Lot and his motives, we are told that he was a good man.
So the observation that we saw is that when the angels came to visit Abraham's home, he showed hospitality immediately. But not only hospitality, he got the whole household involved. He had a young man slaughtering the young calf.
He had other people cooking and preparing the
He had
meal.
right. He basically kicked his household into gear.
He runs in and tells his wife, quickly make bread.
Mm-hmm.
So Sarah, the old woman, the grandmother of the camp, so to speak, is making the bread.
Not only that, but he tells her how many
he gives her a measurement,
an actual measurement of how much. It sounded
pretty generous to me. I mean, it sounded like a big.
So when
amount,
he's giving
I'm not
instructions like that means that they talk like that all the time.
Mm-hmm.
That he doesn't just say go bake bread. He gave her specific instructions of how many cups of flour to use, so to speak.
Now, when I was young, I thought that Abraham recognized that these men were angels, and that's why he ran out to give them.
Think
but
so.
I get the sense as I'm older and I read this that this may have been Abraham's personality to do this. He saw three men coming and he welcomed them. And he welcomed them in with his whole household. And his whole house was... So then you go to Lot. They immediately leave Abraham.
So I think Abraham was known for treating everybody like they were angels. I mean, he would just slaughter the fattened calf for just about anybody who came along. And we made the observation of Lot doing the same thing when the angels entered into the city.
To a certain extent.
Right. And then he did the same thing. They welcomed them in and almost used the exact same phrase, welcome them into the house.
He treated them as if he were a servant and they were honored guests. He brought them into his house, but that's where the similarity begins to break down.
Our observation is that he was by himself.
It says he made the unleavened bread.
Right.
And he stood by to serve. And Abraham stood by to serve also, but you got the sense the household was involved. Sarah was obviously at her tent door listening.
So where was his family? Why was the household not activated, so to speak, when these angels came? Where was the household? This was Lot behaving on his own as an individual.
So then we see when the angels say a little later in the story, okay, the city's going to be destroyed. We're going to save your family. He runs out in the city to talk to his sons-in-law, which we had always assumed were the husbands of the two daughters that he had, except that he makes it very clear that his daughters who are at home have never been with a man.
They're unbetrothed.
Even if they were betrothed, they've never been with a man. He treats the other men, these sons-in-law, he says, who were married to his daughters. And it seems to imply that he has other daughters in the city that are married.
So that means he has his two daughters, the younger daughters, with him at home, unmarried. And then there were additional daughters outside of the house.
And we know there's multiple because there were sons-in-law. There's a plural. And so we went back to Abraham bargaining with God, and he bargains for 10 people's lives.
Right. So we remember when Abraham was negotiating, he says, how many righteous people in the city will you spare the city for? And we noticed that he stopped finally at 10 people. And it's theorized that those 10 people that he was thinking of specifically was Lot's household. So that would mean you have Lot, you have Lot's wife.
That's two.
You have the two children,
that's
the two
four.
daughters.
They're the ones who end up being saved, the four.
And then you have 6 additional people. That would mean that most likely it was 3 additional daughters with 3 additional.
Or you have 2 daughters married and some grandchildren.
That's possible too.
You have multiple. But so Abraham's family is all together outside the city, all working together. Lot's family is scattered throughout the city of Sodom.
And they're not all together.
They're not together.
The
when
household
is
divided.
When he tries to talk to his sons-in-law, they don't treat him with respect.
No.
They mock him.
That's right. He goes out, he tries to explain what's going to happen to his sons-in-laws, and they completely make fun of him.
They do not join him.
So it kind of explains something, that when the day comes for the destruction of Sodom,
Lot tarries.
He doesn't leave. He would not leave. And the reason he would not leave is that his family, his extended family, was not coming with him. They're not going to come with him.
I always thought he was not leaving for the sake of his daughter's betrothed, but that really doesn't make sense, because
No.
if you're a father and you have your 2 daughters in the house with you and you know something's bad's going to happen, I don't think most fathers would linger for the sake, even for the sake of the fiancés, especially if they're mocking him. That's another reason why I think he had daughters out in the city. It was his children
His
that he was
children.
going to be leaving behind.
He didn't want to leave his children behind. But the angel, it says in the text, basically yanked him out of the city.
And they said, take your 2 daughters who are here
Right.
and leave.
So he makes the angel makes it a point saying that you take the 2 daughters that are here and you come with us.
And he still won't leave, so they take them by the hand and drag them out. Now, like Rahab later, if his household had been together under that roof, the angels would have taken all of them out of the
Right.
city.
Right.
Actually, if Lot's household had been as they should have been, and if there really were 10 of them, the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah, who knows how many hundreds of people,
That's right.
could have been saved.
Abraham was hoping that that Lot's extended family, just not even extended family, his household was intact and righteous, and it was found lacking. Lot was considered righteous, and Lot's children were saved for
They were under his roof.
being under his roof. Lot's wife was saved, except that, interestingly enough, she looked back.
Which, if she'd left her daughters behind, you can understand. Although I still wonder why.
Why would she look back?
Why-
Well,
Right.
if you have 2 daughters in the city, then you will look back.
People have speculated, oh, it was her house, it was her fine things, it was her stuff. Maybe that's why she looked back, but it makes much more sense. What I don't understand is why God would have turned her into salt for looking back at her daughters being left behind. That's hard to understand. That's a difficulty.
So it's interesting that when God is telling, he says, should we tell Abraham, my servant, what we're planning on doing with the city? And he goes on to explain the reason he should tell him what's happening in the city is because he is going to follow my ways and teach his children to follow my ways.
I have chosen, he says, have I not chosen Abraham, because he will teach his household.
He will teach his household. And as soon as Abraham finds out about this, he starts petitioning for Lot's household. He knows Lot's approximately 10 people, and he's hoping that his nephew will do the same thing that he's doing and teach his children God's ways so that they would behave righteously.
But Lot, in spite of being a righteous man, has not imitated Abraham,
No.
has not taught his household, does not know how to teach his household God's ways.
So that's a contrast between the salvation of Abraham, who was never in the city to begin with, who has an intact household, and Lot's household, which is in essence
It's
broken.
fractured.
It's fractured.
He's allowed the world to draw his household apart. It's
Right.
broken. It's out from under his roof. His daughters are gone. The 2 that are left were no big prize, but at least they were under.
And
Under
the,
his
and the
household's
world wants so badly to fracture households all the time. I mean, it's like we live in Sodom, and Sodom, the people of Sodom want to break our household up. They want it to be some here, some here. And when we have the angels come to visit, then it's just individuals taking care of them.
Just a few people.
It's not going to be the whole household working together to show hospitality. It's not. That was an example of Abraham's household operating as a unit, operating as a family.
It's not the only time either. When he went after Lot to save him, he
Mhm.
takes 400 men of his own household.
Right.
I
He's
mean,
a leader.
This is a gigantic household, and he takes them off and he fights a trained army and saves Lot.
Right.
So again, we're seeing the effect that the head of a household can have on the salvation
Right.
and the preservation of the people within that household.
And really, the story of Lot is a salvation story, but it's not the kind of salvation story that you'd like to read, because he was pretty much yanked out of the fire.
What is it called in the Bible? Being saved, but yet through fire?
Yeah, that
As
was
if through fire?
that was Lot. He was saved as yet through fire. He was snatched from the flames, and he lost a lot. He lost a lot more than just material things. He lost
lost-
his family.
Almost his entire family.
He lost his wife.
And his dignity and his respect along with it.
He lost his sons-in-laws. He lost his daughters. He had 2 daughters remaining, and that was it. That was the family, is Lot and 2 daughters. And God still managed to make a mighty nation out of Lot and his 2 daughters.
But what we have noticed here is the value of a household remaining together, but not just together, to be working towards the same goal together, and to have the head of the household be not only strong in faith, not only be righteous, because Lot was, from what we hear,
Mm-hmm.
but he also has to be able to bring his family after him.
So you have to have an intact family. And I think it really comes down to what God said about Abraham. Teach your children.
To follow my ways.
Follow my ways. That's the reason that God selected Abraham for the promise, was that he knows that Abraham will teach his children his ways. And that is what is important. He wants households intact, and he wants households being taught the ways of God. And I think the idea is to teach the next generation and the next generation.
Later on, he says, as you walk along the road and when you lie down and when you get up, Moses advised, that's how you teach. That's how you teach your household.
Your children.
This is why we've made a lot of decisions that we've made. And it's also what we notice, the way our society is going. And you have to presume that our society at large, being under the leadership of God's enemy, is going to be trying to do the opposite of what God said to do. The whole thrust is to break apart the household. I mean, right down to the whole issue of gay marriage, right down to it's to separate and to weaken the household so that everybody becomes sort of an autonomous unit and becomes cogs in the greater good, but no longer unique households.
Right. And it's a foreign idea because we've been trained that everything is just individualism. Everybody is just individuals doing things individually. And when you grow up, you go west, young man.
You leave behind your household completely. You
leave behind your household, form a new household, but then when you have children, they leave you and form a new household. So you got these little tiny micro households that nothing ever really gets transmitted from generation to generation. Everything's a clean slate. The strength is gone. So that, I think, is what the Bible is teaching. It is important to be clannish to a certain extent. We're not talking any negative connotation here, by the way. But a clan is a family. That's essentially what it is. It's a household. When you have a group of people working together with the same philosophy, with the same ideas, seeking the same path. And that's, God wants his people to be like that. He wants to be able to look at his people and say, aha, you're from that family. And that's what he did. Aha, you are from the tribe of Gad, Well,
let's go back. He chose the people of Jacob. He chose Jacob's household.
Jacob's household.
You want to belong to God's covenant, you're going to have to become adopted into that household.
Right.
Whatever their flaws, that's just who it is.
And each of the 12 households are unified under the house of Jacob. They are all sons of Jacob.
Right.
And it's the same thing with Abraham and Isaac. These are households. And what makes it unique is that they're following the ways of God.
And that is interesting that God calls himself the God of Abraham, Isaac and Jacob.
Right. So that was our observation on
we're going long.
The story of Sodom and Gomorrah.
We're at 27 minutes.
That's okay. So I hope that was enjoyable. We really want to incorporate the Torah portion into the Ben and Lauren show because we usually have at least semi-interesting thoughts. At least I like to think so.
Wow, the other thing, though, is we can ramble for a long period of time.
And sometimes we do. So I think this is a good time to say good night.
Good night.
Thank you.